Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joseph Weiler, and I'm president of the European University Institute. I get invited to open a lot of the conferences, seminar, workshops that take place here. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But this is different because on this occasion, I feel quite acutely the dark side of the moon, the trade-off of deciding to become president of this institution, because it means that I have to miss occasions like this. Even though when appointed, I said I will continue to be a professor, I give a seminar, I supervise students, but I really don't have enough time to engage in as much academic activity as I would like to, and especially in a conference like this, I feel it most acutely, because here it's not just pro forma, welcome, etc., but this is a subject on which I've written, which interests me intensely, both as a scholar and as a citizen. What can I say in 3 or 4 minutes? And I thought, what can I say actually in my new role, rather than as somebody engaged in the actual scholarship and the actual debate? So I have 4 points. The first one is that democracy in a time of crisis is like freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is tested when the speech that we have to defend is the speech we hate most. Everybody is in favor of freedom of speech until some very ugly stuff surfaces. And you are put to the test if you are willing to uphold your standards of freedom, even to defend that kind of speech. And the same is in some way true for democracy. I was at the European Parliament yesterday, or the day yesterday, for an event a bit like this, and there were voices there, I must say, not from parliamentarians, who were concerned that in this elections there will be parties, etc., who do not support the European idea. And what can we do about that? Well, the only thing we can do about that, and I'm not talking about the sort of racist, xenophobic, the sort of Holocaust denier types which are outside the limits, but the only thing one can do with it is to combat those ideas and to, in the democratic process. So democracy in a time of crisis, that's part of the challenge. The second thing that happens on occasions like this is the resort to what I find the odious and otious notion of false consciousness. If they don't think the way I think, it must mean they don't understand. I just have to explain a bit better, which is in some way a sign of huge disrespect to your political adversary. He or she don't understand, they're in some way inferior. I just have to explain a little bit better. I saw a lot of that when the Constitution was rejected by some of the peoples of Europe. And the reaction was, we didn't explain it well enough. No, maybe the reaction should have been, they understood it very well and they just didn't want it. It was not just that we didn't explain it well enough. One is reminded of Brecht, the people have disappointed, let's change the people. We can't go down like that. The third danger is reductionism. It's not that they don't understand it and I have to explain it better, but they vote, or this is their electoral preference, or this is their political preference because of A, B, and C, which is also a form of disrespect. I remember, because I'm old enough, in the early days of feminism, they are taking this position because, with a whole variety of explanation, unsatisfied women, etc. Instead of engaging with the argument, finding an explanation why somebody adopts the argument. And that is also a serious danger which I see now in the discussions about democracy in the type of crisis. You don't engage with the argument, you try and find some kind of psychological or sociological explanation why a person is taking a point of view with which politically or philosophically you just happen to disagree. So all these are things that in this kind of discussion of democracy and type of crisis, I think we should be conscious of not, if my views have validity, not to fall foul to it. And then as academics, as intellectuals, and this is my last point, it's very important both in terms of self-awareness and also when presenting one's paper, etc., to try as far as possible, and we can never be fully self-aware. We wouldn't be able to live if we were. But to try as far as possible to be transparent about our observational standpoint. Am I an engaged intellectual with a political ideological point of view which informs my discussion? It's perfectly okay to be an engaged intellectual, but let's be transparent about it. I come and I stand before you as an engaged intellectual and I'm not appropriating the mantle of, or, for example, am I a dispassionate social scientist who is really, as far as one can, and it's pretty difficult and maybe impossible, just trying to explain phenomena, etc. But I'm not in the position of an engaged intellectual in this presentation or this analysis, etc. And when the lines are blurred, there's something that is taken away from the impact of what we do. And to the extent that I'm not in analytical or normative mode, but I'm a facilitator of the process. So what I want to do is, in a time of crisis, to think of ways to facilitate the democratic process, to make it more transparent, etc. The same kind of self-examination and self-critique and transparency is called for. Am I truly facilitating the democratic process, or am I facilitating the democratic process with a certain result that I would prefer in mind, so that it would, in a Cass-Sunstein way, nudge it in this direction or nudge it in that direction? So also there it calls for great introspection, because those are the things that we tend to hide from ourselves and inadvertently, I'm sure, hide from our audience. So with this, I really wish you very, very successful and productive, and I don't promise not to drop in during the day today or tomorrow. Thank you all.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me as director of the Schumann Center to welcome all of you to this UDO Dissemination Conference. UDO is a very valued and valuable part of the Schumann Center. We do a lot of things in Schumann, from regulation of energy to climate, all sorts of policy areas. But UDO is, in a sense, where we concentrate on some of the big questions of political order. I will continue to support it as part of Schumann, and it is one of the main themes that we will develop in Schumann over the next 5 years is a focus on integration, governance, and democracy. So we expect you to grow, to strengthen, and to become an even more flourishing part of the Schumann Center. The topic you have, elections in a time of crisis, is obviously timely, and it's because we're still in the crisis, it's a difficult issue to address. We see on the one hand a bonfire of incumbent governments. Governing in Europe today carries a health warning, particularly if you're a government in a troubled country. We see the rise of the challenger parties, a lot of volatility, historically unprecedented collapses in the votes of some once powerful parties. And yet the centre has held. There's been some voter rebellion, but not dramatic in the sense that challenger parties have only threatened to come close to power in one state, but in all of the others, the centre, this vulnerable and fragile centre, has held. And my intuition is that it's not the elections that we have had, but the next round of elections that will really tell us what's happening in terms of electoral behaviour and party systems in this crisis. Because on the one hand, if growth resumes and if unemployment begins to be reduced and there is a prospect of some level of prosperity for the troubled countries again, and there may not be, then one could see that volatility reducing, although some of the trends, of course, predate the crisis and are not going to go away. On the other hand, if we don't have a return to growth, and growth has been a really serious problem for Europe for a very long time now, and a lot of the politics of post-war Europe have been about distributing the fruits of growth. If we're in a low-growth future, particularly for troubled countries, the peripheral countries, including my own, then I think we will look to a period of extreme volatility, and that centre may not hold. I wish you well for your deliberations. I have cleared most of my diary because I intend to enjoy this conference and to be with you over the 2 days as much as I can. And again, I would like to congratulate Alex and his colleagues for all of the work they've done in the past in building UDU, and I certainly pledge my support to ensuring that it continues to be a very flourishing part of the Schuman Centre. You're all very welcome.
Thank you very much, both Joseph and Brigid, for this welcome. It's now my turn to warmly welcome all the participants to this conference. It's a great pleasure for me to see so many old friends and new friends in this room today. UDU has been growing really, as this conference has been growing over the past 8 years. This is the 5th annual dissemination conference now. This year was very particular because we have received a new director among ourselves, Hans-Peter Kriesi, who took over from the late Peter Mayer as one of the co-directors of the OPPR. And then in the summer of this year, Brigid Laffan joined the EUI as the director of the Schuman Center and therefore became ex officio a director of UDU, and we're very happy about these 2 new arrivals. For the other activities that we have been doing, etc., I refer to the brand new annual report that I've just received now, and I invite you to have a look at what else we have been doing besides organizing such conferences. The goal of the dissemination conference, which, as I mentioned, is now the 5th edition, is to bring together some of our academic colleagues and policymakers, civil society organizations, etc., to exchange and mutually help each other in our quest for ideas on democracy in Europe. And so far, this has been actually pretty successful. We're growing. The conference is becoming more and more important and becomes some kind of point on the radar of people dealing with European democracy. Now, as last year, we have again this year the topic of the crisis. Last year, we were interested in the effects of the euro crisis on democracy in Europe, and particularly the effects of the euro crisis on institutions of the European Union, on institutions at the national level as well, the tensions that were created through all sorts of new institutional arrangements regarding the legitimacy of democratic processes. This year we are focusing on elections. This is our dependent variable, so to say, for this year's conference, where we're interested in the tensions that have been created at all sorts of levels, endemic within the member states, pandemic, if you want, across the member states, and then also vertically, of course, between the European Union and the member states. And these tensions have inevitably some effects on the way elections are conducted, on the campaigns that lead to the elections, and on the outcomes of elections, of course. This year we had an important electoral year with several elections, and 2 among them, among those really stand out: the Italian elections, of course, and the German elections that have been commented on by some people as being the real European elections, but the European elections to the European Parliament take place, as we all know, in May 2014. So we thought this is the right moment to start reflecting on these effects, on the effects of the crisis on national and the upcoming European elections. I was very fortunate because this year I could work together with Hans-Peter Krisi and Luciano Bardi, the two directors of the Observatory on Political Parties and Representation within UDU, and together we could conceive the program of this conference, a program that is just as dense and as heavy, if you want, as the crisis. And this morning you will see we have two plenary sessions followed by 2 blocks of breakout sessions. It is unfortunate. I would love to assist to all of them, but I can't divide myself in 6. None of us can. But I'm sure we're videotaping this, and there will be a lot of that material available to you also after the conference of what has been said. Tomorrow, again, we have 2 blocks of breakout sessions in the morning and the plenary session in the afternoon. And as we have no real conclusion to the conference, I would like to now thank everybody that has been not only coming to Florence, but that actually was very important in the organization of this conference, beyond Hans-Peter's and Luciano's intellectual input. And I would like to mention in particular Valentina Bettin, with whom you have all been in touch. Enrico Calosio has helped us, and then the team of the conference unit of the Schumann Center, who has been as effective as they've always been, Monica Vallari and Elisabetta Spagnoli. So thank you very much with this, and welcome. Thank you.